All right, so we're diving deep today, folks. Deep into Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now, which I know a lot of you out there have been asking about. And I gotta say, it's a pretty powerful read, you know? It really gets you thinking.
Yeah, it does.
I mean, like, imagine feeling totally lost,
Right.
right? Anxious, like something huge is just missing. You know that feeling.
Yeah.
And then, bam, you stumble on this, like, treasure chest overflowing with inner peace and joy. That's what Tolle is getting at, you know? And we're going to break it all down for you.
Well, what's cool is that Tolle doesn't say enlightenment is like this, mystical, impossible thing. He actually just says it's the end of suffering.
Oh, wow. That's pretty straightforward, I guess.
Yeah, it is. He says it's like this natural state of being one with what he calls being.
Yeah.
And it's available to everyone, not just like monks on a mountaintop.
All right, right. So we're not talking about levitating or like reading minds.
Oh, no.
More like finding peace within, that kind of thing.
Exactly. He uses this great analogy about a beggar sitting on a box of gold, completely oblivious. Like he has no idea what he's sitting on.
Oh, wow.
And he says a lot of us are like that beggar, always chasing after happiness outside ourselves.
Oh, yeah, that's so true.
But it's like right there inside us all along.
Makes you think, huh? Like, how often are we all chasing, I don't know, validation or whatever outside ourselves when maybe, just maybe, it's already inside?
Yeah, it's a big shift in perspective. And one of the biggest roadblocks, according to Tolle, is that we're like totally identified with our minds.
Oh, sure.
We think all that mental chatter, that's who we are.
Mm.
But it's just a tool, right? It's not actually us.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. But if our minds are just tools, how do we, like, not get so caught up in all the noise? It's, like, nonstop sometimes, you know?
Right. Well, Tolle talks about this thing he calls watching the thinker. I mean, basically, you just observe your thoughts. Don't judge them. Just let them, pass through like clouds. That creates some space between you and your thoughts, and that's where you start to get those little glimpses of peace.
So instead of getting swept away by, like, all the worries and stuff, we're just kind of observing them.
Exactly.
That sounds kind of tough, actually.
It takes practice, for sure, but even little bits of stillness can be, powerful.
I bet.
Tolle thinks those gaps in the mental noise are super important because they let us tap into the power of right now, of the present moment.
And that's like the key to not suffering.
Exactly. He says all our suffering comes from, dwelling on the past or freaking out about the future, basically resisting what is.
Yeah, that's definitely me sometimes.
He tells this amazing story in the book about seeing a tree with no mind, I think he calls it.
No mind.
Yeah, like he was able to just perceive the trees, like essence, its aliveness, you know, and he felt this deep connection to it.
Wow.
It's a great example of how being totally present can totally change how we see things.
That's kind of beautiful. It makes me think about those times when I'm totally lost in something, listening to music or something. Time just like vanishes and I feel so peaceful.
Yeah.
Is that what he means?
Exactly. Those little tastes of the power of... Now, but let's be real. Our minds are masters at yanking us right back out of the present moment,
Tell me about it. So what are some ways our minds, like, sabotage us?
Well, Tolle points out some common traps, like waiting, complaining, even making up problems. All that keeps us from experiencing life fully right now.
Oh, yeah. I do that all the time.
He actually calls these different states of, like, unawareness, ordinary, and deep unconsciousness.
Okay, now I'm confused. What's the difference between ordinary and deep?
All right, so imagine ordinary unconsciousness as being on autopilot, like scrolling on your phone while you wait in line. You're not really there,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But deep unconsciousness, that's like being totally swallowed up by worry about the future, and you miss the amazing sunset happening right in front of you.
Oh, I see. So basically, we're either distracted or consumed by thoughts, and both ways we're missing out on the now.
Right. And we flip back and forth all the time without even realizing it. We wait in line at the store, then we wait for the weekend, then we're waiting for our lives to start. And all that time, the awesomeness of being alive, of this moment, is just passing us by.
Whoa, that's kind of heavy. So is there any way out of this cycle, or are we just stuck at... Does Tolle offer any, like, solutions?
He does, and this is where it gets really interesting. He says there are all these portals to access a deeper reality, what he calls the unmanifested, this realm of pure being.
Portals, like in a video game.
Kinda, yeah. He describes portals like the inner body, surrender, silence, space, all these different doorways to experience something beyond our minds, something that's always there, but we usually miss it.
Okay, this is blowing my mind a little. Can you give me an example? Like, how does one of these portals even work?
Sure. Let's take the inner body, for example. Tolle has this guided meditation where you focus on feeling your inner body. It's a great way to get stillness and peace. You shift your attention from your thoughts to the physical sensations inside you.
Oh, so instead of listening to all the mental chatter, I'd be tuning into, like, my breath or how my feet feel on the floor.
Exactly. By focusing on those sensations, you start to disconnect from the thinking mind and connect with a deeper sense of yourself. A sense of just being present beyond all the thoughts.
That's wild. So it's like a way to bypass all the noise and tap into this peace that's already there.
That's it. And that's just one example. Each portal offers a different way to experience this unmanifested, this pure being that Tolle talks about.
Man, this is like deep stuff. It sounds like Tolle's not just giving us philosophy. He's giving us a real practical way to experience a, deeper, better reality.
Yeah, he is. And that brings us to another important point. All this chasing after happiness can actually block us from finding true peace.
Wait, what? Isn't happiness like the goal?
It seems like it, right? But Tolle says that chasing after those fleeting moments of happiness often keeps us from this deeper peace that's beyond all the emotional ups and downs. He actually says that embracing what is, even the bad stuff, can lead us to this deeper peace that doesn't depend on anything outside of us.
So it's not about pretending everything is fine, but more like accepting things, even if they suck.
Exactly. Think of it like a deep lake, right? The surface might be all choppy with waves, but way down deep, it's still and calm.
Oh, I get it.
True peace is like that stillness, accepting all the ups and downs without fighting them.
That's a nice image. I'm starting to see how this shift from chasing happiness to just being okay with things could make me feel more peaceful inside more consistently. But how do we actually do that? How do we embrace the bad stuff without just giving up?
Well, that's where this idea of surrender comes in,
Yeah.
and it's often misunderstood.
Yeah, surrender sounds like giving up or losing. But I bet Tolle has a different take on it.
He does. He makes it super clear that surrender is not about weakness or, being passive.
Okay, so if it's not giving up, what does he mean by surrender?
Think of it like aligning yourself with how life's flowing instead of constantly swimming against the current. You can still take action, make changes. It's just about doing it from this place of, presence, letting things happen naturally.
Okay, that's kind of intriguing, but can you give me an example? What would surrender look like in real life?
All right, picture a sailboat, right? It adjusts its sails to work with the wind instead of trying to, row against it. Surrender is kind of like that. You're aligning yourself with what Tolle calls the intelligence of being, which is way smarter than our little ego minds.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. It's about working with life, not fighting against it. But how does that connect to accepting the bad stuff?
It's about accepting what's happening right now without all the judgment or resistance. You don't have to like it. But it's about letting go of that need to control everything, especially the things you can't control anyway.
So instead of freaking out about a situation, I just accept it and try to move forward from a calmer place.
That's it. It's about letting go of the struggle in your head and just letting life, carry you. And that's where the real power is, according to Tolle. This whole surrender thing, it's especially tough in relationships. Our minds, they love to create drama, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
A lot of it comes from unmet needs and stuff we picked up along the way.
Makes sense. Relationships can bring up a lot of baggage. Does Tolle have any advice on how to handle that stuff with more awareness?
He does, actually. Some really interesting stuff about relationships. He starts by talking about how we try to find wholeness in another person, and that always ends up, disappointing.
Yeah, I can see that. It's like expecting one person to be everything you need, right?
Right. And Tolle says that as long as we're stuck identifying with our minds, we'll keep projecting all our unmet needs onto other people.
Oh, that's so true.
It creates this cycle of needing them and, conflict, like trying to force the wrong puzzle pieces together. It'll never really fit.
So how do we avoid that trap? How do we, stop projecting so much?
He says real fulfillment in relationships only happens when we found that sense of wholeness within ourselves first.
So we're not looking for someone to complete us, but more like sharing our fullness with them.
Yeah, like two full cups overflowing, not two empty ones trying to fill each other up.
That's a good way to put it. But how do we even start to feel whole, within ourselves?
It starts with noticing what Tolle calls the pain body. All the emotional pain from the past that we carry around.
Pain body. What is that exactly, and how does it mess with our relationships?
Okay, imagine this. Someone cuts you off in traffic, and you just like explode with anger, way more than the situation calls for.
Oh, yeah.
That's your pain body reacting. It's bringing old hurt into the present moment.
So it's like a backpack full of old wounds that we drag everywhere, and we don't even realize it.
Exactly. And that can really damage relationships.
Definitely.
It's like having this hidden wound that keeps getting infected.
So how do we heal that? How do we, let go of all that baggage?
Tolle says real healing comes from acceptance, not fighting or trying to fix it.
Hmm.
Like letting a storm pass through instead of trying to, control the weather. He suggests just observing the pain body without judgment.
Oh, interesting.
Just let it be, and its energy kind of dissipates on its own.
So we don't fight it or push it away, we just create space for it. That sounds kind of counterintuitive, but also, freeing.
It is. And this brings us to another thing about relationships that Tolle kind of shakes up. The whole idea of romantic love.
Uh-oh.
He suggests it's often based on needing someone else and being afraid to be alone. He calls it the search for wholeness.
So not exactly the fairy tale, huh? Isn't romantic love supposed to be about finding your, soulmate, your other half?
That's the story we're told, yeah. But Tolle says true love, like the real deal, can only happen when we've already found wholeness within ourselves.
Yeah.
I see.
This kind of love isn't about clinging to someone or needing them. It's about really appreciating the other person for who they are.
So it's about sharing your fullness, not using them to fill a void in yourself.
Exactly. It takes all the pressure off,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it sounds like this kind of love for Tolle is more like a reflection of the love we already are, the love that connects all of us.
Right. And that takes us to compassion, which, kind of naturally flows from this deeper understanding of love.
So how does he define compassion then?
He says it's this awareness of a deep bond between us and, every living thing. He says true compassion is bigger than empathy or just feeling sorry for someone.
Oh.
It's about recognizing our shared vulnerability. We're all going to die someday. But also our shared immortality, our oneness with everything.
So it's not just about feeling bad for someone who's hurting, but more like seeing that we're all connected, all in this together. That's it. Tolle reminds us that even though we seem separate on the surface, like physically, we're all connected on a deeper level. And that can really change how we see the world,
Yeah, moving beyond judgment and separation, I can see how compassion could be a powerful force for, changing ourselves and the world around us.
It is. And Tolle says it's not just a passive feeling, it's a force for change, both inside and out.
So it's not just about feeling it, but letting it guide how we act and interact with the world. Does that tie back into surrender?
It does. In a way, surrender is about, going with the flow of life, and compassion naturally comes from that. When we surrender to the present moment, we're more open to seeing that connection between everything, and compassion just flows from that.
That's beautiful. It sounds like surrender and compassion are like two sides of the same coin, both about letting go of the ego's need to control and, letting a deeper wisdom guide us.
Yeah, exactly. And that brings us to what might seem like a paradox. Embracing everything, even the bad stuff, can actually lead to more peace and joy.
Okay, that does sound kind of contradictory. How can accepting the bad things make us happier?
It might seem that way, but Tolle says that when we resist what's happening, we create our own suffering.
Right.
It's like swimming upstream, you're just constantly fighting. He says acceptance doesn't mean we're passive or giving up. It's just recognizing what is without judgment.
So instead of fighting a situation, we allow it to be without, adding more suffering by resisting it? But doesn't that mean we shouldn't try to change things or make them better?
Not necessarily. It's not about giving up on taking action. It's more about recognizing that true peace comes from accepting things as they are, even if they're hard. And from that acceptance, you can choose how you respond,
So we act from a place of peace, not fear or resistance. Makes sense. But how do we actually get to that acceptance, especially when things are really tough?
Tolle says we don't have to like everything that happens, but we can choose to accept that it's part of life, the ups and downs.
Yeah.
He uses this analogy of a deep lake. Remember,
Yeah.
the surface might be stormy, but deep down, it's always still. He says true peace is like that, accepting everything without fighting it.
That's a good reminder. It's like, even when life is chaotic, there's still this peace inside us, if we can just tap into it. But that takes a lot of practice, I imagine.
It does.
Uh-huh.
But like anything, it gets easier the more we do it. Tolle says one of the best ways to become more aware of the present moment is focusing on our breath.
Like meditation.
Yeah, exactly. The breath is always there. It's like an anchor to the present moment. Just by focusing on it, we can interrupt all the thoughts and create some space for stillness.
Sounds easy enough, but I bet it's harder than it seems to actually quiet the mind and focus, huh?
It can be tough at first, but it gets easier with practice. Even if you can only focus for a few seconds, those moments are powerful.
I bet.
They give you a taste of that stillness that's always there, underneath all the thinking.
It sounds like Tully is saying that being present isn't passive, it's something we actively cultivate, like with the breath.
He is. And he says it's not just about feeling good or avoiding tough emotions. It's about experiencing life fully as it is, the good and the bad.
So we experience it all without judgment. That's a big shift.
It is. And it changes how we experience everything. Tolle says all suffering comes from living in the past or the future, resisting what's happening now.
Right.
When we focus on the present moment, we step out of time, and into this timeless realm.
So we escape the tyranny of our minds by grounding ourselves in the now.
Exactly. And that's the core of Tolle's message, the power of the present moment. He says it's the only place we can truly experience life, connect with who we really are, and, feel that joy of being.
This all makes sense in theory, but I think a lot of people might be wondering how to actually live this way. It sounds pretty daunting to go from living in our heads to embracing this power of now.
It's true. It's not a quick fix. But Tolle says enlightenment isn't something we achieve. It's something we realize.
Oh, interesting.
It's about recognizing who we already are, the truth that's already within us.
So it's not about becoming someone new, but uncovering the peace and joy that's already there.
That's it. And there are lots of ways to do that. Meditation, self-inquiry, just paying attention to what's happening right now.
So it's not about spending hours meditating every day. We can do this in everyday life.
Absolutely. Even little moments of awareness throughout the day can make a big difference. Like really tasting your coffee, feeling the sun on your skin, taking a few deep breaths before you answer a stressful email.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's about being present in everything we do, even the small stuff.
Exactly. And Tolle also talks about the importance of relationships. He says they can be like catalysts for spiritual growth.
So relationships aren't just about finding someone to love. They're chances to grow and learn.
Right. He says they give us tons of opportunities to practice presence, compassion, forgiveness.
So we can deepen our love and understanding.
It's
Man, this deep dive into the power of now has been like a total whirlwind. We've covered so much, from enlightenment to surrender to going with the flow of life. It's a lot to take in.
It is, yeah. We've gone deep, and I hope our listeners are starting to see how they can use Tolle's ideas in their own lives, make it practical.
Yeah, for sure. I think what really hits me is that Tolle isn't just giving us a philosophy lecture.
Right.
It's like he's saying, wake up. This present moment is where it's at, and it's available right now.
Absolutely. And he's not saying we got to run off to a cave and meditate all day,
Right.
It's about being present in everything, whether
Yeah.
you're meditating, talking to someone, even just doing the dishes.
Yeah, making it part of everyday life, not something separate.
Exactly. It's about shifting from doing to being, from trying to achieve stuff to just experiencing. And that can be really freeing.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some key takeaways you'd want our listeners to remember?
Well, I think the biggest one is that real power and fulfillment come from inside us, not from outside stuff. We don't have to go looking for happiness or enlightenment.
Right.
It's already there.
It's like we've got this treasure chest full of peace and joy and love, but we're so busy looking for it somewhere else that we don't even see it.
That's a great way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings us back to that analogy. Remember, the beggar sitting on the box of gold.
Yeah,
We might have everything we need, but if we're not aware of it, it doesn't even matter.
right. And another big takeaway is realizing that our minds aren't really who we are, right?
Exactly.
They're just tools. But when we think we are our minds, that's when we get into trouble.
Yeah. So much of our suffering comes from believing all those stories our minds make up,
Yeah.
the worries and regrets and all that. It's like being trapped in our own heads.
Totally. So Tolle says we need to practice watching the thinker, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Just observing our thoughts without judging them so we can find that stillness and peace.
And realizing that we have a choice. We can let our thoughts control us or we can be aware of them. And when we become the observer, we can find that freedom and peace no matter what's happening around us.
Yeah, that's powerful. And that kind of leads us back to surrender, which we talked about a lot. Not the giving up kind of surrender, but the kind where we align with life.
It can be tough to wrap our heads around surrender, especially because we're always told to be in control, to achieve, to strive.
For sure. But it's not about being passive, right?
Right. It's about letting go of that resistance to what's happening and trusting that life will unfold as it should.
Trusting that there's like a bigger intelligence at work, something beyond our limited thinking.
Exactly. And that brings us to another key point. Accepting things, even the tough stuff, can actually lead to more peace and joy.
That still sounds kind of crazy, but I'm starting to get it.
It seems counterintuitive, but when we resist what's happening, that's when we create suffering for ourselves. Acceptance, on the other hand, opens us up to this deep inner peace that isn't affected by the ups and downs of life. It's about recognizing that the hard stuff is just part of life, and fighting it only makes us feel worse.
It's like trying to stop the ocean's tide from coming in, right?
Yeah.
You can try to hold it back, but eventually those waves are going to crash over you. Acceptance is more like learning to surf, I guess. You can ride those waves more gracefully when you're not fighting them.
That's a perfect analogy. And it highlights something else we talked about, the importance of relationships.
Yeah.
They give us so many chances to practice presence, compassion, and forgiveness.
All those things lead to more love and understanding.
Right. Relationships can be hard, but they're also huge opportunities for growth. They're like mirrors, showing us our own patterns and habits.
Yeah, totally.
And by being more aware in our relationships, we can learn to communicate better, set healthy boundaries, and build stronger connections.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the power of now, what's one last thought you'd like to leave our listeners with?
If I had to pick just one, it'd be this. That power of the present moment, it's always there for you. It's just waiting for you to tap into it. Even a few minutes of being mindful, like paying attention to your breath or the sounds around you, can shift your whole perspective. It can bring you peace and connection, and that can affect everything else in your life.
That's a beautiful reminder. The present moment is always here, waiting for us to wake up to it. And when we do that, we not only change our own lives, but we also help create a better world for everyone.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been great.
And to all our listeners, until next time, may you find peace and joy in the power of now.